Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 4, Chapter 12, Text 16. Atma Sri Apatya Surido Balam Rida Kosham
Striyapatya Surbalyam Radakasham
Anta Purampari Vihara Bhavas Charamya
Antapura
Purapariviraripuvasyaramya
Bhumandalam Jaladi Mikhalam Akalaya
Bhumandala
Chalati
Chalime Kala Makalaya Kalaya
Kalo Pastrashtamiti Sa Prayayo Vishalam.
Kalo Parastam
Sisimiti Sa Prapyayo Vishalam.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Thus Dhruva Maharaj, at the end, left his kingdom, which extended all over the earth and was bounded by the great oceans. He considered his body, his wives, his children, his friends, his army, his rich treasury, his very comfortable palaces, and his many enjoyable pleasure grounds to be creations of the illusory energy. Thus, in due course of time, he retired to the forest in the Himalayas known as Badrikashram. In the beginning of his life, when he went to the forest in search of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Dhruva Maharaj realized that all bodily conceptions of pleasure are products of the illusory energy. So he got self-realization when he was just 5 years old boy. He engaged in devotional service and he was able to see the Lord personally. Realize that all bodily conceptions of pleasure are products of the illusory energy means we are always thinking that we are going to enjoy with this body and things connected to the body. But this is all an illusion. It's all the work of Maya Devi. In the very beginning, of course, he was after the kingdom of his father. And in order to get it, he went to search for the Supreme Lord. But he later realized that everything is the creation of the illusory energy. So we are so attached to this material world. For lifetimes and lifetimes, um, we have been here and we are still thinking this is a reality without understanding that all this is actually just a temporary place. Yes, we are here. Yes, very much we are here. But we are not the body. We are inside the body. We are not able to understand that. From the acts of Srila Dhruva Maharaj, we can understand that somehow or other, if one becomes Krishna conscious, it does not matter what his motivation is in the beginning. He will eventually realize the real truth by the grace of the Lord. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that 4 types of pious people come to him. And Dhruv Maharaj was one of this kind. He was searching for wealth. He wanted a great kingdom. So Srila Prabhupada is saying it doesn't matter. Somehow or the other come to Krishna consciousness. Somehow or the other take up devotional service. We may, have desires, no desires, or we may desire liberation. Bhagavatam says, still engage in the service of Krishna. Engage in devotional service. Why? Because eventually we will understand the real truth. We will understand it. And how? By the grace of the Lord. The process of bhakti, we are dependent on the mercy of Krishna. So by the mercy of Krishna, we will be able to understand the truth. In the beginning, Dhruv Maharaj was interested in the kingdom of his father, but later he became a great devotee, Mahabhagavat, and had no interest in material enjoyment. The perfection of life can be achieved only by devotees. Even if one completes only a minute percentage, a minute percentage of devotional service, and then falls down from his immature position, he's better than a person who fully engages in the fruitive activities of this material world. So Prabhupada is pointing out that even if one does just very little devotional service, it's still better than doing nothing, because that will really save us. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that even a small beginning can save us from the greatest type of danger, greatest type of fear. Just a small, even slight devotional service. Because at least it will give us an opportunity in the next life to begin where we left off from. We are encouraged to continue to hear and chant regularly. Tasyam Vishuddha Karana Shiva Varvikaya
Tasyam Vishuddha Karna Shiva Vigraha
Badhavasanam Jitamaron Manasa Hritakshaha
Vadasva Asanam Jeet Marut Manasa Ahataha
Sthule Dadara Bhagavat Pratirupa Etat
Stule Dadara Bhagvat Pratirup Etat
Dhyayam Stad Avyavahito Vyasrajat Samadhav.
Dhyayanstad Avyahit Vrasajsrijat Samado.
In Badrikashram, Dhruva Maharaj's senses became completely purified because he bathed regularly in the crystal clear, purified water. He fixed his sitting position and by yogic practice, controlled the breathing process and the air of life. In this way, his senses were completely withdrawn. Then he concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha form of the Lord, which is the exact replica of the Lord, and thus meditating upon him, entered into complete trance. So Dhruv Maharaj, he wanted a big kingdom. He engaged in devotional service. He got a big kingdom, but he became a pure devotee. And so he ruled the kingdom for 36,000 years. He had all the pleasures, but he realized that all this is temporary. And that's how he's able to give up. You know, how many people are able to give up such a comfortable position as being the emperor of the world? And now he's in Badrikashram and he's performing austerities. And he's fixing the mind on the form of the Lord, not on anything void, not imagining anything. No, he's fixing his mind. So we can see the yogi. The yogi, he is always thinking of the Lord. Here is a description of the Ashtanga Yoga system to which Dhruv Maharaj was already accustomed. Ashtanga Yoga was never meant to be practiced in a fashionable city. Dhruv Maharaj went to Badrikashram and in a solitary place, alone he practiced yoga. So Ashtanga Yoga, of course, the goal of yoga is to realize the Supreme Lord, the Paramatma in the heart. But because this process takes a very long time and we do not have that kind of time, we do not have that kind of mental capability now. And that's the reason we are advised to do chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So, and Dhruv Maharaj, what Prabhupada is pointing out, that he's not doing his bhajan here in the city, but he's in a forest. He concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha, the worshipable deity of the Lord, which exactly represents the Supreme Lord, and thus thinking constantly of that deity, he became absorbed in trance. So he's entered. How? He's just thinking of the Lord, the deity of the Lord. The deity and the Lord is non-different, is Krishna himself. And so Dhruv Maharaj is just fixing his mind on him. Worship of the Archa Vigraha is not idol worship. The Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Lord in a form appreciable by a devotee. Therefore, devotees engage in this temple in the service of the Lord as Archa Vigraha, a form made of stula, material objects such as stone, metal, wood, jewels, or paint. All of these are called stula, or physical representations. So the deity in the temple, the Archa Vigraha, is the Lord himself. He is appearing to us in a form in which we can appreciate, in which we are able to see him, in which that we are able to offer our devotion to him. That's the reason he's accepting this form, for our benefit. Since the devotees follow the regulative principles of worship, even though the Lord is there in his physical form, he is non-different from his original spiritual form. So the deity is the Lord himself. Thus, the devotee gets the benefit of achieving the ultimate goal of life, that is to say, becoming always absorbed in the thought of the Lord. So here, Dhruva Maharaj, he fixed his mind on the deity. In the temple also, the devotees are just fixed in serving the deity. And that's how they are absorbed in the thought of the Lord all the time. This incessant thought of the Lord, as prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita, makes one the topmost yogi. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, the last verse, that Atmana, the yogi who's always thinking of me, he's the topmost yogi. So constantly to think of the Lord. And we can constantly think of the Lord when we chant his holy name. Chanting the Hare Krishna mantra helps us to constantly think of the Lord. Bhaktim hara bhagvati pravahan asa ajas ram.
Bhaktim haro bhagavati pravahan ajastram.
Ananda bhashpa kalaya muhur ardyamanaha.
Ananda bhashpa kalaya mur ardhmanah.
Viklidyamana hridaya pulaka chitango.
Viklidhyamana pulk achit ango.
Natmanam asmarad asavyati muktalingaha.
Na atmanam asmarantam asviti muktalinga.
Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. So he is having ecstatic symptoms. His incessant tears which are flowing from his eyes is not because of suffering. It's because of this complete bliss that he's feeling in his heart. Due to constant engagement in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity, etc., as prescribed in 9 varieties, there are different symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. So when a devotee is engaged in devotional service, they might have this ecstatic symptoms. These 8 bodily transformations, which indicate that a devotee is already liberated within himself, are called Ashta Sattvika Vikar. So these symptoms a devotee can feel when he's liberated, after liberation. He's still in the body, but he's liberated. He's no more under the modes of nature. He's completely understood his position in relation to Krishna. He's completely understood, I'm a soul, I'm not the body. I have a loving relationship with Krishna, and he's engaging in this relationship. And at that time, there will be this transformations of the body, the ecstatic symptoms, which are called Ashta Sattvika Vikar. So a devotee may choose not to, usually a pure devotee will not exhibit such symptoms. Why? Because he does not want to disturb the minds of others, and he does not want other people to become pretenders. Some people might pretend that they are already liberated and that they have this ecstatic symptoms, but they might not be at that level. So that's why the pure devotee, he usually will not show these publicly. Publicly, he will not show it. When a devotee completely forgets his bodily existence, he should be understood to be liberated. So this happens at the stage when we can see that by engaging in devotional service, we do get liberation. When a devotee completely forgets his bodily existence, he should be understood to be liberated. He is no longer engaged in the body. The example is given that when a coconut becomes completely dry, the coconut pulp within the coconut shell separates from the bondage of the shell and the outer covering. So the soul is still in the body, but the soul has completely understood, I'm not this body. He's not under the clutches of the modes of nature. His false ego is completely gone, and he's understood, I am a servant of Krishna. I am a soul. I am a spirit soul. I have a loving relationship with Krishna. So Prabhupada is giving the example how there's a coconut. The coconut, the shell is stuck to the pulp, right? But when the coconut is dry, then the shell and the pulp is separated. We can hear it when it is separated. By moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp within is no longer attached to the shell or to the covering. Similarly, when one is fully absorbed in devotional service, he is completely disconnected from the two material coverings, the subtle and gross bodies. So a pure devotee, he is completely absorbed in hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity. Is completely absorbed in devotional service. And so he's completely forgotten that he's the body. He's not under the control of the modes of nature. He does not identify himself with the subtle or the gross body. He's not identifying himself like that. He's understood his true identity. So he's self-realized. Dhruva Maharaj actually attained this stage of life by constantly discharging devotional service. So Dhruva Maharaj is an example that he's practically showing us that by engaging in devotional service, one can get self-realization. He did it. Practically, he's showing us. Of course, it's just that in the age of Satyug, the yoga was the process, and in Kali Yuga, it is Sankirtan Yoga, Sankirtan Yagya, or Bhakti, chanting the holy names. But Dhruva Maharaj was also engaging in devotional service. He was doing his yogic practice, but he was also engaged in devotional service. He has already been described as a Mahabhagavat, for unless one becomes a Mahabhagavat or a first-class pure devotee, these symptoms are not visible. Mahabhagavat. He's like a Vaishnava, a first-class pure devotee. Lord Chaitanya exhibited all these symptoms. The 8 ecstatic bodily symptoms. There's 8 transformations of the body which can appear in the body of a Mahabhagavat. Thakur Haridas also exhibited them, and the many pure devotees who manifested such bodily symptoms. They are not to be imitated, but when one is actually advanced, these symptoms are exhibited. So we should not try to artificially imitate these symptoms to pretend that we have reached to that stage. Once we reach that stage, if we reach that stage, the symptoms will automatically be there. At that time, it is to be understood that the devotee is materially free. So it means no more under the control of material nature, no more under the control of goodness, passion, and ignorance. He's situated on the transcendental platform. Of course, from the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens, just as the coconut taken from the tree immediately begins to dry. It simply takes some time for the shell and pulp to separate from one another. So Prabhupada is pointing out one who has begun devotional service, for sure he's going to get liberation. It's just a matter of time. Just as Prabhupada is saying, the coconut is taken from the tree, so in matter of time, it is going to dry up. The pulp is going to separate from the shell. It's just going to take some time. So anyone who is begin devotional service, liberation opens up. The path of liberation opens. And one day, the devotee will reach there. An important word in this verse
This is
is
such a
Muktaling.
beautiful line that Prabhupada has written. Like what you said, it's not written here, that the one who begins devotional service will surely be liberated. It's such a powerful and so simply he has, we are just reading it so simply. And
Yeah.
it's such an important thing, that like assurance given by, such a beautiful assurance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's evident from the life of Dhruva Maharaj.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada is pointing that out to us. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
An important word in this verse is Mukta Linga. Mukta means liberated and Linga means the subtle body. When a man dies, he quits the gross body, but the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego carries him to a new body. So we keep hearing, oh, this one left the body, this one has died, this one has died. What happens is the soul has left the gross body, the body that we can see. But there is also a subtle body. So the subtle body takes the man to his new body. You see, when we are dying, we have given up many gross bodies, millions of gross bodies we have taken and we have given up. We have died millions of times, taken birth millions of times. But what we have not given up is our subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and false ego. And this subtle body goes with us to a new body. We get a new body. While existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. For example, from childhood to boyhood by mental development. So now we are in a new body. At that time, then the body grows, right? Prabhupada is giving the example, childhood to boyhood. And it's the same subtle body. The subtle body does not change. We may change gross bodies. We may be sometimes in the body of a dog, sometimes in the body of a human being, but our mind, intelligence, and false ego is growing with us. And in that body, it is just evolving. The mental condition of a baby is different from that of a boy. The mental condition of a boy is different from that of a young man. And the mental condition of a young man is different from that of an old man. So at death, the process of changing bodies takes place due to the subtle body. The mind, intelligence, and ego carry the soul from one gross body to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. So this is how the soul transmigrates. The soul is taken from one body to another body with the mind, intelligence, and false ego. But there is another stage when one becomes liberated even from the subtle body. At that time, the living entity is competent and fully prepared to be transferred to the transcendental or spiritual world. So this subtle body can also be given up. When we are engaging in devotional service, the mind, intelligence, and false ego can completely be purified. And that is what is this, liberated even from the subtle body. Right now, our mind, intelligence, false ego is completely absorbed in thinking we are the body, not the soul. So at liberation, not only does the soul give up this gross body, but also the subtle body. The mind is completely purified. The intelligence is completely purified. There's no more false ego thinking that I'm the body. The ego becomes the true ego. So at that time, he's fully prepared to be transferred to the transcendental or spiritual world because there's no more coverings. No more coverings are there. The description of the bodily symptoms of Dhruva Maharaj makes it apparent that he became perfectly fit to be transferred to the spiritual world. One can experience the distinction between the subtle and gross bodies even daily. In a dream, one's gross body is lying on the bed, while the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. Therefore, one has to become free from the subtle body also. This freedom is known as Mukta Linga. So Prabhupada is pointing out that when we are dreaming, even though the gross body is lying on the bed, but in our dreams we are going to different places, sometimes maybe even different planets. But then how are we going there? We are going through the subtle body. And then, but because still our time to leave the gross body is not there, when we wake up in the morning, the soul is brought back into this gross body. I'm sorry, not the soul, the subtle body. The subtle body comes back. But here Prabhupada is writing the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. So we do have a subtle body, and that's what we need to purify, our subtle body. Is that okay? Are there questions on this? The subtle body, the gross body. So when we are hearing and chanting, our subtle body is being purified also. We are getting free from this. So we'll stop here if there are questions. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.